Thank you so much. Excellencies, ministers, and distinguished guests. It is a real privilege for me to be here today in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which is setting a remarkable example on how education and skills are at the heart of economic growth. The Human Capability Initiative, aligned with Saudi Arabia Vision 2030 and Learning to Earning model, serves as inspiration to countries across the region. Today's conversation comes at a critical time. The Middle East and North Africa face some of the world's highest youth unemployment rates. In many countries, up to 30% of young people are not in education or employment. Two-thirds of these are young women. At the same time, 40% of employers in the region cite skills gap as the main barrier to business growth. Now imagine the challenge in 10 or 15 years, as new technologies, particularly artificial intelligence, rapidly reshape our economies. This raises an urgent question. How do we equip young people with the skills they need for jobs that do not exist yet? I believe that the only answer is through quality education. Indeed, when harnessed well, a $1 investment in education and skills can generate $10, $15 in economic growth. But to drive growth, education system must impart the knowledge and skills that young women and men will need to contribute and thrive in the economies of the 21st century. The most in-demand skills in today's world are analytical thinking, creativity, and flexibility, in addition to digital and technological skills. Yet more than half of 10 years old in the Middle East and North Africa cannot read or understand a simple story. And this constitutes a learning crisis, a major barrier to building the human capital needed to harness the opportunity of the 21st century. Addressing this challenge requires government to transform their education system. And that is the very mission of the Global Partnership for Education. GPE is the only partnership and fund that brings together all actors, governments, donors, the private sector, foundations, civil society organizations, teachers, and young people on equal footing to drive large-scale education reform in 90 low and lower middle-income countries. Saudi Arabia has been a member since 2021, contributing a generous $38 million and lending their vision and expertise to our mission. And it is an honor to see other GP donors and partner countries in this room today. Together, our achievements as a partnership have been impressive. Since 2021, we have supported over 250 million children with better education. 70% are in countries affected by fragility and conflict. And with ever-growing pressure on resources, we have leveraged the power of our partnership to pioneer innovative financing solutions to crowd more investment into the education sector. In collaboration with the Islamic Development Bank and the Arab Coordination Group, GPE has introduced an innovative financing tool, ACG Smart Ed. Together, we have mobilized $850 million to provide quality education for children across 37 member countries of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. So far, $410 million have been allocated to Uzbekistan, Cameroon, the Kyrgyz Republic, and Chad to support national priority reforms, from building data systems to training teachers to strengthening early childhood development and to include children with disability. GPE was created through a shared belief that only by working in partnership can we drive the progress in education that we need to create more peaceful society and prosperous economies. That commitment is more relevant than ever today. With GPE's experience in transforming education system and Saudi Arabia's leadership in developing human capabilities for the world of tomorrow, there is great potential to learn from each other. And in that spirit, I look forward to learning from all of you here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Lara. Please join us on the panel. You gave us a lot to think about there, right? And the scope of that work is absolutely huge. And I wanted to start with His Excellency because obviously part of that conversation is the digital transformation that we're seeing as well. Obviously working with multinational corporations and platforms such as GPE, how are you managing to scale those efforts over such a massive country such as yours?
Okay, Egypt has indeed made impressive progress in digital transformation, particularly in education. Whether through national platforms, smart classrooms, or teacher training programs, but as I emphasized in past engagements, such as my address at the Literacy and Writing Skills Initiative, transformation must be both inclusive and sustainable. Multilateral cooperation through platforms like Global Partnership for Education can play a catalytic role here. With Egypt now eligible for the GPA multiplier, we have a unique opportunity to not only scale digital skills training across our public education system, but to attract both bilateral and private sector co-investment. The 3-to-1 and 1-to-1 matching mechanisms are powerful tools that can multiply the impact of existing programs, enabling expansion into under-resourced regions and marginalized communities, ensuring that digital transformation does not stop at urban centers.
Yeah, so a lot has been going on, and we know from everything that we've heard today that technology has been a huge part of this leap.
Right.
And Your Excellency, Leila, if I can bring you in on this one, I kind of alluded to it in the beginning of my introduction to this panel, and maybe some in the audience don't realize that connection between pre-primary education, those foundational level outcomes, and the impact they have. I know it's something you're very passionate about, and you've been working hard, and you actually have the hard results to prove the success of all of that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for having me chance in this panel discussion. It is obvious it was hard to start, and the first thing that we have done is to make sure we mandated pre-primary in our educational policy since 2006. We make compulsory for every child in our country to make sure they attend pre-primary compulsory. So we have a special campaign to make sure that we enroll all children in all areas, whether town area or remote area. And we faced a challenge at the time when we started of shortage of classroom. So we mobilized community with development partners. Thank you very much to UNICEF, GPA, World Bank. They supported us a lot. So we have a special school called Tutu. That was a community school established in a remote area where maybe it is very hard for students to travel from to follow the nearby school. So it was just sometime we have individual house, we use them as a starting point, we call them Tutu. We train, teacher, local people in the villages to train and to nurture literacy skill to children, and is where they join to school. So this campaign, after few years, helped us a lot. First, to increase the enrollment of children in primary school by 22% compared before. And it helped to enhance readiness of children emotionally, physically, and enroll the interest of students to learn in school. That is the first step as a government we take to make sure. But again, we strengthen training to teachers through teachers centers. We have in every district in our country, we have teacher center. So we train teachers regularly. Those who are informal employed by the government who support this community school, because community school, we didn't have formally employed teacher. We have voluntary teachers from the community, their parents, their sisters, their mother, retired teacher, they were using those to school. So now we legalize and formally recognize those to school as a formal school. We employed those teachers after long training given through by government and a development partner like UNICEF. We have a long training for teachers for many, many years. We nurture them and then we employ them. And some of them, they are in retired time, but we give them contract employment because they have a lot of skill gained through training.
Don't lose that expertise out of the system.
Exactly, to make sure that they have. And a part of training now, we strengthen infrastructure to minimize overcrowdedness. We want the international standard every class to have 45 to 35 students in pre-primary. So that is the effort that we make. And greatly we succeed to make sure we meet the basic foundational learning for our students.
So if I summarize that, because there's so much to get our minds around, I always think it's great to create tick lists of what a successful framework looks like. And as you're saying there in Zanzibar, it's inclusive, it's from community all the way through. You've kind of gone back from an informal system, but pushed back into training and providing structures on top of that, and that constant training and inclusion of every stakeholder, if you like, in that decision, and starting people incredibly young. I'm fascinated by this huge impact that the very early learning is having. So thank you for that, giving us a really good guide of what success looks like. Ahmed, no surprise that Save the Children have children at the heart of everything they do, and placing young people in the center of development strategies is been one of your major priorities. So how are you seeing this education and enablement working out?
Yeah, if you allow me just to bring the conversation a bit to the impact on children, young people in conflict zones and a fragile security situation where you'll find their access to quality education, or in fact, even access to education emergencies. My colleagues will testify to that. One of the most underfunded areas in emergency response is funding education emergencies. You see the gap moving much faster, much bigger, much wider, because on one hand, those who are attending normal education systems are lagging behind with the accessing to the skills that are required today. So you can only imagine the impact for kids and children, young people who are even deprived access to a normal facility and normal education infrastructure. I think where things are coming to me now, and I've been practicing this field for 20 years, and let me share with you a story from my undergraduate degree. I studied computer information system, and we studied for 4 years. By the time I graduated, the coding language we were using was obsolete in the market in 4 years. Now, it's been said that the average life of a new skill you acquired is 5 years. So things are moving extremely fast, and even faster now. I think the bigger question that we find ourselves into now, within Save the Children across the sector, is how you can do that bridge and bridging the divide between what kind of wiring for the formal education system you have and how you can deliver hopes for young people who are graduating or trying to engage in the labor market. To tell you the truth, I believe, and I'm going to be controversial a bit here, when it comes to formal education system, we'll continue playing catch up forever. We'll never be ahead of the game. And if you look at young people today, I think some of them are learning in spite of formal education, not because of it. Because when you have a very poor quality formal education systems, then young people will have to innovate and find alternatives ways of learning. The kind of trends, the kind of technologies available to them will make the gap much wider and much bigger. In fact, I'm a huge admirer to the work carried in Egypt. I mean, it's quite revolutionary about putting tablets and deciding that there's no shortcut. You really have to move and cut almost all corners in order to innovate the formal education system. In Save the Children, the commitment the organization has across 100 countries is trying to continue deliver quality programs that would bridge that divide, but also trying to make sure that those who have been left behind in conflict settings will be able to bridge some of these skills gap by offering quality training. And the key formula for us, we believe quality training could compensate for poor education.
Okay. Yeah, and there's that common thread through what you're all saying there, and we'll come back to that. Of course, Ibrahim, Dr. Ibrahim, you're on the corporate side of the fence. You are the person that is looking for talent within your organization. And when we think about candidates and their skills training being in line with what you need in the end and what industry needs, we had an interesting conversation a while ago, about a week ago, and you were saying that you've actually boiled it down to 3 core skills. And I think it's really useful to share that with the room, because simple is often best. We get confused about sometimes being too fancy about things that we need to do for a future employer. So give us your list, and then you can all reflect on that and see where you get to.
So it's a privilege to be here, and I want to second what you said. Like, formal education will continue to play catch up. And the idea of learning, we used to say everything is available at your fingertips. That was before AI. Now with AI, actually, I compared my comments to AI's comments answering your questions. They were better than mine. But if you think about the speed of change, we really look at three things. And if I want to focus children education specifically, because by the time they graduate from high school, everything has changed. The whole labor market has changed. I want them to learn first how to learn or how to search for the information. Second, how to think. And third, how to communicate. The knowledge itself is getting less and less relevant. That piece of information and that fact is less and less relevant. Of course, for now, if you are a surgeon, we need you to have practice, but I think within 10 years that will not be relevant as well. But the ability to learn and critically think and then communicate and influence others is what matters. So if I would look at a formal education system, I would focus on those three things. And when we assess at Khwarizmi, whether it's in our VC arm, PE arm, or real estate arm, we look for people who have grit, discipline, and are able to quickly learn. Because even within the 5-year span of a startup, the ecosystem completely changes. And if they are not able to critically analyze what's happening around them and learn and find the right information and right point of view, and then communicate it well, whether to their clients, investors, or team, they can succeed. So how to think, how to learn, and how to communicate.
Yeah, which keeps you flexible and adaptable to the changing environment. And talking about adaptable, Your Excellency, Latif, if I could bring it back to you, really building also what Ahmed said about this regional equity. Through in Egypt, it's digital skills, but making sure you don't widen the gap with the most vulnerable, that they're the ones that lose out in this equation. So how are you doing that to bring in these digital skills?
Okay, I also underscore this in Egypt's National Literacy and Writing Skills Initiative, where we noted that in a system with 25 million students, AI is not luxury, it's a necessity to deliver differentiated, responsive learning at scale. It's not replacing educators, of course. It's extending their reach, enabling them to connect with every learner, even in the most remote and overcrowded settings. You know, we have one of our big challenges in Egypt was overcrowded classrooms. Now we're over it, and we don't have one single class in Egypt with over 50 students, which is an achievement. So now we can use, all our students in Egypt in high school, they are granted a tablet, as Dr. Ahmed said, and we have all our classrooms are equipped with internet. So that's something helping to do this paradigm shift to students, teachers, and parents. Most of our teachers, hundreds of thousands of teachers, are well trained on how to use tech in education. We're moving right now to a blended learning model where we will use flipped classroom in our classes with students with gadgets, teachers well trained, and using AI informative assessments. That's our approach, and that's how we can differentiate. That's differentiate in education. That's how we can personalize, even in rural and urban and underserved areas. So that's where we're moving. We've been doing this for 10 years. We've reached very successful results till now. And what's going on is we're using AI as well to scale our big data, because we have very big data with our 25 million students.
So I want to come back to scalability, because not just for Egypt, the learning's beyond your boundaries as well from what you're saying there. Ahmed, I want to come back to you because you alluded to it, but I think it's really important that we delve into empowering the vulnerable youth that we were hearing about there from His Excellency in those crisis-affected contexts. So how can you work in that context to try and bridge the gap? What are you doing?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier the need for increased funding, and that's an obvious need, of course. But beyond that, I think if you look at traditional humanitarian response, you look at providing shelter, food, medication, and then I was trying to expand that to go and say education is a necessity, and that cannot wait 2-3 years while children in refugee camps or transition. So you need to provide that early to them. But what we are finding out now is that actually connectivity is a necessity. if you don't connect them early, you will be losing out as well on the opportunity of getting them some of these shortcuts in terms of accessing to skills and training. So connectivity is definitely at the top of the list. Increased funding from the 2-3% stand to be corrected there of the funding available for education emergencies would be another one. But the third dimension is also about, I think it's needed in this forum and this conference for us to say it, what we're seeing today in terms of how many are turning backs to the need of appreciating and honoring the needs of this generation of children, young people, to live in dignity and access their rights. Seems the right to live is being compromised now, today. And so therefore, I think the need for us to speak out for the children and their rights is of paramount importance. I would also argue that a collaboration in the sectors today, we see in the response from Save the Children, we need to work with others, and that's why we've been championing in the cluster system, the humanitarian response, a more coordinated approach in the way we can deliver support, equality and access to education and training, psychosocial support for children and young people who have been impacted by conflicts.
And I think it's an important point, and one I've heard across many panels that I've been lucky enough to chair during HCI, is that the world is too complex to navigate alone now. You know, these public-private partnerships or any form of partnership is needed, even in a normal situation, shall we say, a normal corporate situation. So when we're in a fragile state, I guess more than ever, that is required. Your Excellency, Leila, I wanted to bring now in another theme which sometimes gets a back seat, but certain countries are prioritizing. I used to live in Switzerland, where it's very much a priority in the agenda, and that's vocational training. Sometimes it's seen as a second runner, but it's increasingly becoming so important again, the old apprenticeships that we used to have in the UK. And I believe it's something you're really pushing in Zanzibar now as a way forward for people to rejoin the workforce.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. It is true that within the reforms that were taking place in our education system, vocational education, ICT integration, and industrial collaboration is a part of the parcel and is our priority as a government. And to make sure that we have taken a number of strategies to make sure that first, our curriculum now, in basic education, we integrate vocational education as a basic education. For the student from pre-primary, primary up to secondary school. In pre-primary ICT, we are using through playing, as a part of pedagogical. They use this tool to make sure they become aware with digital skill. But in primary, there's a specialization now of ICT and vocational education. Our aim as a government is to make sure that when students, they graduated from their basic education, they have some skill for them. It will be easier for them to engage in groups and to employ themselves, or it's easier for them to be employed. But more important, apart from integrating curriculum, ICT, vocational to be part of the curriculum, we have a collaboration with international organization, international institution. For example, we have signed memorandum of understanding with the government of India. And in Zanzibar now, we have Indian Institute of Technology, Madrasa Satellite Campus in Zanzibar. Part of artificial intelligence and data science program are offered there to make sure we strengthen internal capacity of local people in Zanzibar, as ICT now is a compulsory skill to be nurtured in our education system. But again, we have collaboration with private companies, where we give a chance to our students in school to have place for internship and practices. When they're studying in school, in their classroom, in secondary level, at college level, we have a number of companies where they go for practical, so they become exposed to the skills that are nurtured in school. And we are believing that through this, we will have the competent graduate from our education system. That is what we're doing. But again, as we did for pre-primary, also in this part of vocational, because it's a new thing in our curriculum. We train our teachers. And we design the curriculum teacher, educator for vocational education, because before we didn't have. We just trained teacher for general subjects. science subject, social science subject,
So
but for vocational
specialising.
education we didn't have. But now we have introduced a new curriculum of teacher framework where vocational education will be offered. So we'll have teachers who will specialize in vocational education and who will teach in secondary school.
And it's incredible how you're pushing it back down always to foundational level, because you always think of sort of apprenticeships as something for teenagers. And I can see Dr. Ibrahim there at the end nodding away, you know. And of course, these partnerships between the corporate sector and, of course, education is essential so that the skill set that comes out at the end is something that you can use. And vocational training, on-the-job training is only going to be good news, I guess.
Yes, and it's very important to really incorporate that within it, not have it as an afterthought. Many educational systems build the education system, then incorporate the private sector, and at the end, if the goal is to increase productivity and allow people to really contribute to the economy, it needs to be in line with the private sector. And one thought here, when we are building, let's say I'm building a mine or an export hub, the government is okay subsidizing me with building a port or a road with hard infrastructure. But when I'm doing a development, AI development center, why don't I get subsidized the same way? Where instead of either reducing the cost by saying I'll subsidize your labor, which is the wrong incentive. You're saying the people you're hiring are not worth how much you're paying them. If the education and upskilling is subsidized, then I know they want to get paid X. Let me make them worth X or X plus 2 for you. That's a different way of thinking about alignment between the private sector and the government sector and the public sector. And here there's no downside. The worst outcome, even if they don't continue to be employed by that entity, you end up with 1,000 better trained AI engineers. So I think being more agile and more willing to really invest in the productivity of the labor force, not reducing the cost, instead increasing the productivity, and having the private sector involved from the design phase is very important. We're seeing some initiatives in Saudi on that. For example, when Lucid, Seer, and others announced that they're building factories in Saudi, the government subsidized people going to be trained in their factories overseas to be ready by the time the factories open here. When you talk about vocational training, whether it's Switzerland or what's happening in Zanzibar, I think that's a good way to incentivize the upskilling without really making it a shot in the dark.
Okay, time is always too short, so we're going to have to be quick on the on the roundup here and reflections. And I sat in a Lucid yesterday, very nice car. There's some outside if you want to check them out. Lara, maybe we started with you, and I'd like to start the closure with you. And the same question really to everyone is, what's the single most important thing that needs to be done now to basically increase this human capability, to increase this ability to be available to the labor market? So Lara.
So I would say that it is to reform the curricula. Children learn so many things that in a way are unnecessary to their future or not applicable. And so reform the curricula thinking about two things. The first one, that education is not a process that is completed by the end of secondary or tertiary education. You have to continue building and you have to continue learning. And so maybe you should invest less in the formal process and create some kind of lifelong learning that supplements that as the knowledge evolves. And the second, I like very much what Minister Leila was saying, grounded into what is local, grounded into the society in which the children, the students are then going to operate, make it relevant.
Okay, quickly, we've got time for about a line each, Your Excellency.
Okay, I'll talk beyond national scale. Egypt also recognizes its role within the wider region.
Yeah, and the scalability is going to be a big one.
Yeah, by working with GPA and regional partners, Egypt can contribute to a pan-Arab digital educational framework, supporting knowledge sharing, open access to training platforms, and regional upskilling initiatives. This would extend the benefits of Egypt's transformation to neighboring countries, especially those facing educational disruption due to conflict or limited infrastructure. In essence, multilateral cooperation isn't just about funding. It's about vision alignment, equity, and regional solidarity. Egypt is ready to lead on that front, and GPE is a trusted partner in making that vision a reality. Thank you.
So that's going to happen now. Leila? in one line.
Okay. On this matter, I'll say only 2 points. First, we have to recognize the prior knowledge that our people in our communities they have. Some people they are experts, but they don't go through formal education. They learn from their family member, from group they have. So as the authority, we have to recognize. We did it in Zanzibar through ILO, International Labour Organization, and it became a very successful program where local people who have knowledge, we recognize, we give them certificates, so it is easier for them to be employed in some private institution as well as the government. But another issue is to give more access for skill and vocational skill without the consideration academic criteria. We need give them free. If you have interest to learn something, you go and learn. Thank you.
Ahmed.
Go beyond formal education, and it's not only there, it's also about non-formal education. Yesterday, there was a partnership signed and announced between the Scouts and the Ministry of Education here, and that non-formal education makes all the difference. I see it. You build the skills for life. What used to be called soft skills are existential skills now, and you don't learn it in a classroom only.
Yeah, soft skills, hard results, as my friend Karina says. Finally, Ibrahim, Dr. Ibrahim.
So most of the initiatives we have are playing catch-up and working about the challenge we have today. Would be great if there is a team everywhere we go that is focused about 15 years from now, that is not bothered with the challenges today, but we have no excuse that the outcomes of education 15 years from now are playing catch-up.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much. You hit the button. And thank you for your contributions today. And thank you, audience, for listening. And we make our way off the stage. Thank you.